Okay, welcome everyone to the Creating Regenerative Psychology Practices event. This is the second one that we've done. We did one back in September. It's great to see a couple more people here for this event, so hopefully it starts growing more and more. And the aim is to just kind of come together, discuss how we can create regenerative psychology practices, and Wendy will do a bit more of an introduction about the concept of regenerative psychology practices. So I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So a bit of housekeeping. This event is recorded, and this is so we can put the recording on our YouTube channel at Inspiring Psychology Practices, so that we can continue the discussion like in the comments. So keep that in mind when you want to decide how much you want to participate in this event, because if you have your camera on and you speak, you will be recorded and then it will be posted on YouTube. If we're going to do 3 questions today, and we'll spend about 15 minutes on each question. So just to make sure everything goes seamlessly, if you can please use like the raise hand function. Hopefully there is one on the Zoom. And so, yeah, if you want to speak, just use the raise hand function. And then thirdly, you can also use the group chat to continue the discussion. If you have an idea or you come up with something you're not speaking or you don't want to speak, we can have a bit of discussion going in the chat as well. And that's basically it for the housekeeping. I'm gonna stop sharing.
There
we go. And then I'll pass on to Wendy now to kind of introduce the questions and get everything going. Thanks.
Yeah, it's lovely to see everybody here. Okay, so as Ava mentioned, this is the second of these events that we've run. And I guess they came from a kind of reaction to what we'd seen over the last year and a half or so, especially in working with people who run their own psychology practices. And I guess because of pandemics, but not just pandemics, a lot of uncertainty and disruption, it was just becoming blindingly obvious that we needed to question and come up with different ways of working that weren't just about sustainability, that weren't just about staying at the same level or not doing further harm, but were actually about restoring and regenerating us as practitioners, the clients that we work with, the communities and societies around us, and also our local and global environment. Because there's been, too much kind of separation. Are we doing psychology or are we doing something to do with the environment? Why are these things separated? So one of the things that really hooked me for a long time was the idea that I needed to be an expert in something in order to run an event about it. And the reality is I don't have solutions, but starting to explore this topic, actually, it's really crucial that we get comfortable with not being experts and not having answers. So, and that's why in the kind of title to this introduction, it talked about becoming comfortable living with the questions, living with deep questions that we have. So this kind of event is a place for us to come together, to struggle with the unknowns, to bring our ideas and resources. There's a lot of potential, a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge available, but we need to bring more in. And to also find the edges of what we know and what we don't know and what we can do and where we feel powerful or not. So if you see me struggling with some of this, that's a symptom of where I'm at with it as well. But I wanted to open up this space. Hi, Alice. As I mentioned, it's being recorded, as Ava mentioned, it's being recorded from this perspective of being an open knowledge event. So this will go on the YouTube channel, but it will be shareable. you'll be able to share it. It will go in and we'll invite everyone to connect through social media at the end as well. And overall, the idea is to raise these questions, come up with ideas, understand more of the obstacles, struggle with the questions, draw more people into our community, our network, and into finding, what can they do what can they do locally in their lives as well, and how can we kind of connect together. So the format for these kinds of events is for us to have a series of questions, where an opportunity to reflect individually and then to come in and have a discussion about it. And then what I hope is that when we post that on social media, people come in. Jeanette, I remember the last time you watched our first, you couldn't attend live, you watched our first event, and then you also commented, and we've kept the conversation going, and now you're here with us live. So that was just an example of how that has worked in the past. So it's not our intention that this somehow belongs to us. This is open knowledge. These are open questions, and we just wanted to host this space for all of you. Have I missed anything, Eva, that I said I would say?
No, I think that's good.
Okay,
we can start with the first question.
Yeah. So 15 minutes on each of these questions, and that will take us up to 5 to the hour, when we'll just do a quick kind of last points and what's next. The first question, and in fact I just wanted to show you a model of regenerative design, because I think it could be an interesting framework for you to have a look at. So this is from the book Regenerative, flipping heck, is in front of me, Designing Regenerative Cultures by Daniel Christian Wall. And it's contrasting or this scale of conventional practice going from compliance to avoid legal actions through green, sustainable, restorative, reconciliatory, and regenerative. And I'll post kind of references and things under the video when we get that edited and up on YouTube. And the idea is that a regenerative approach is decreasing energy use and systemic vitality is increasing. Those sound like good things to me from a psychology practice point of view, from the practicing of psychology. And a degenerating system where vitality is decreasing, which sounds familiar to me, even with psychology practices, is one that is increasing energy use, which may be more exploitative in different ways. And I think that could be include some interesting concepts for you to think about. So first question, and I would offer you a couple of minutes just to reflect on this individually. Either make some notes yourself. You're welcome to also drop any notes into the chat. And the first question is, where are our psychology practices already regenerative? If we think about that system vitality increasing, a reduction in energy use, and these ideas around restoring what has been destroyed, restoring what has been damaged. Where do we think our psychology practices are already regenerative? So just a couple of minutes on that. How are you doing on your notes? I don't want to exile you from the discussion for too long. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I'm not just going to jump in with my own thing. If you want to speak from what you've been noting down or anything that's come up from you on that question, then feel free to raise your hand in the reactions. If you click on reactions underneath, you can see there's a little tab that says raise hand, and we'll come over to you.
I think Fiona's got her hand up, so go for it.
Oh gosh, you know what? It was in the, I couldn't see it against the skylight. Sorry, Fiona. Apologies for that. My fault. Fiona, you're muted there still.
Oh yes, if I have the floor, I'm happy to speak. I think in part I'm still coming to grips with what this means, but I put a number of things down, and the piece of clarity it has given me is to do with social media. And this question was good for that, because I'm pretty consistent on social media, but I've been wondering about the way I do it and some groups that I'm involved in. And I'm not sure some of the groups, as in the WhatsApp kind of support groups, not all of them are aligned, and I've been struggling with it. And I think I've been thinking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So this has given me actually really good insight, because it's made me realize I enjoy many aspects of social media and think there's great value for my clients as well on social media. It's just how I don't like all of it, and I think there's one aspect of it that I don't like, that I'm going to retire, but I haven't been brave enough yet. But this is really showing me that I just need to opt out of one aspect that's not working for me. It just doesn't feel genuine to me now. And that's one of my core things. I want people to know I'm genuine, I'm direct, I'm practical. And I think this other bit has not been resonating with me. So that's been a really useful reflection point within this question.
So one of the things that I take from that, thanks Fiona, is, well, that I'm just picking up on, is this sense of genuineness and connecting in a genuine way somehow was feeling more regenerative to you in terms of showing up on social media.
Yes, I found myself in some aspects being really careful with my words and only agreeing with aspects that I could truly agree with, but that in itself just did not feel like, I don't want to present like that. That's not really how I am. So it is the authentic and real connections that I want to make.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Sally, I think you had your hand raised next. Hi there.
I didn't think I'd be speaking so quickly. So I'm Sally. Thank you for hosting this conversation. It's something I've been interested in for a while and thinking about. And I suppose I've been thinking, I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, but I'm actually now practice as a community psychologist, and a lot of some of my attention is going to how we do good community building practices.
Brilliant.
Different types of practices around that, like non-violent communication, or and how they can be embedded into regenerative villages, for example, or those kinds of things. But also I generally think, and I know I have, as a community psychologist, I idealize it as a discipline, but I genuinely think community psychology has a lot to offer here in this space, and that we should all be now practicing as community psychologists.
Awesome. We need to invite you to run a some kind of masterclass for us on what all that looks like. I would love to know more about that. Thanks for that contribution, Sally. Claire, you're next.
Hi, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about how I like to think of my role actually as being about re-energizing, re-engaging, restoring, whether it's families, whether it's schools, whether it's communities, whether that's through supervisory work or consultative work, but being the person who can go in and re-engage or re-energize a system that's feeling stuck, and actually how we can then broaden those concepts out about how can we widen that community participatory element of it. How can we use that energy that we put into the community to go from one individual into kind of a multiplied societal impact?
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that I wrote down is that I think especially our one-to-one work with client increases vitality. And one of the things that I would note as well is that working with more purpose, for me anyway, as a practitioner, so thinking about how my practice has restored or regenerated me, being more on purpose, more aligned with values, definitely has the capacity to kind of restore vitality. Fiona, I think something about that is to do with that authenticity, feeling like yourself, like you're uncovering more of yourself as you work more in this way. There's something restorative and regenerative about that. Thanks for that. Ava's reminding me that we need to move on, but as I mentioned to you, the discussion's not over. So when we post things on social media and so on, please do come back in with any of your other comments. So the next question we have is kind of moving to the other side, which is a little bit more challenging, perhaps, even emotionally or logically. Where are our psychology practices extractive or even exploitative? And I'll give you a couple of minutes on that, but I'm going to put that slide back up that kind of has that schematic on it. So yeah, where are our practices more extractive or exploitative? Okay, so anyone want to raise their hands around that as well? I was thinking about this earlier in the week and I didn't find it easy at first, and then I started to find more examples as I thought about it. Oh yeah, Alice. Yeah. Oh, still on mute. There you are.
Yeah, it's really tricky to sort of think about those things, and I guess there's like two aspects that I've sort of thought about in this time. One side is kind of like the business side, and kind of, you know, an aspect of business is how do we keep people coming in and how do we keep sort of, you know, that traction going, because in order to be profitable and that side of things, then we have to keep thinking about that way. And so thinking about kind of the life cycle of our clients and designing products around that keep people in the business. I think that's quite, yeah, there's room there for exploitative,
Yes. Yeah.
If not kind of dealt with carefully, I guess.
Yeah.
And the other side, I guess, the psychology side, I think that I'm thinking about kind of educational psychology, because obviously that's my background, but I think in mental health, it can, you know, it maps out to that as well. And I found, like, in my training, there was kind of this division between those of us who worked in a very strengths-based and I suppose, you know, around the kind of positive psychology concepts, versus those who perhaps were more working in a more, I suppose, diagnostic way and identifying, diagnosing and finding problems within within factors. And I think that there's a trickiness there as well. I know that, you know, in the mental health sphere, kind of this idea of talking about mental health as a continuum, and rather than kind of very defined kind of lines between wellness and not being well. And you know, and I think that there's a lot of overlap with kind of, in educational psychology, the special educational needs and kind of that continuum of where children are in terms of their abilities, and you know, who decided that year one children have to sit at the table for like 20 minutes at a time and be able to kind of learn all their phonics and, you know, etc. And if not, then for sure they've got something wrong with their literacy skills, or, you know, things along those lines.
Yeah, there's some good examples there, and I really appreciate also bringing in the educational psychology perspective. You know, I'm an occupational psychologist. I know Fiona is as well. Alice, you're educational. I know that Jeanette and Jade and others among you have got different backgrounds. Sally, you were talking about community psychology. One of the things that really struck me, which I think speaks to your point, Alice, is that one of the extractive methods or extractive features of psychology, at least how we practice it in this country and maybe some of the other kind of, you know, Anglo-Saxon models around the world, USA, Australia, and so on, have similar models, which is that we create divisions of psychology. And we don't have many kind of crossovers, and that's not a very systemic view. And therefore we don't learn from one another, and therefore we're expending energy going over the same ground, when if we came together, there'd be some kind of synergies involved, hence bringing people together. So to me, that was kind of speaking to what you're saying there, which is actually there's a continuum of human experience. And why aren't we all working together on it instead of categorizing, cutting up and pathologizing? Thanks for that, Alice. Claire, you've had your hand raised for a while. That nice golden hand. Can I see you? Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yes. So I was thinking about a couple of different aspects. One, that I'm having an awful lot of conversations at the moment around burnout and compassion fatigue. And one of the things that psychology is very consuming of is the psychologist, and particularly doing high intense one-to-one work. And so I think we often leave ourselves out of thinking about the regeneration and the resources that, and how resource intense it is. And when you then multiplied that by, you know, the number of professionals you think of working within the NHS or the education system, and the kind of the how consumatory it is as a mechanism. And then I was also thinking about, from an energy perspective and an environmental perspective, the high energy use of buildings. You know, when we're doing one-to-one work, just how much consumption is happening for only a very small amount of client benefit. And so actually just, you know, if you think about education establishments and schools and businesses, just how consuming it is to be tackling things on a one-to-one level, and the level of replication that's happening there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. The level of burnout and so on in our psychology, in psychologists themselves, in itself is a massive indicator that it's an extractive industry. Ava had a great point in the first session that we did, which was that extractive models use resources as though they're limitless. And I think that's what human resources in some industries and some organizations kind of have this approach that there'll always be somebody in, you know, when we burn one out, there'll be another one along. And we're not a limitless resource either. So Ava's first degree is environmental science. So I really appreciated that. Just reminded me of what you said there, Eva. Jeanette, can we bring you in? And then Sally, you had a really great point in the chat, if you'd be willing to bring that in after Jeanette as well. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on what both Alice and Claire just said, because I agree with them both. And I think I'm trying to keep my train of thought as it's, you know, I'm very political, Wendy, and anything political, I think, right, okay, what's going on here? And it reminds me of when you go to the doctors and they don't look at you holistically. In my experience, they look at you as, right, there's this problem, let's give you a pill for it. They never, in my experience personally, think about what your diet is like, what your mental health is like, and how your diet can make you better, basically, if you get the right diet. And when we talk about exploitation, you know, it reminds me of potentially, this is just my opinion, I acknowledge that, how drug companies, it's in their best interest to have that illness model rather than wellness model. So I'm very big with my clients on looking at diet. What's your diet like? Are you getting the right nutrition, etc.? What's your thyroid like? Is that contributing to your depression, etc.? So there's that part, and I don't know whether you've heard of it, about burnout recently. And well, obviously you've heard about burnout, but in Portugal, they're trying to pass a law now that if you contact your employee after, say, 9 to 5, you can get in trouble because they need that downtime. And presumably it's along the same lines that we're talking about, to regenerate people, because we're not limitless resources. You know, there's only so much of us. But I also think about exploitation, and I've mixed feelings on this, what Alice was saying about, could we potentially exploit a client? Yes, we could, of course we could. But at the same time, it's important to remember clients are autonomous as well. And they have a voice, and they can decide whether they want or don't want your service, basically. And not to take too much responsibility. But I also think that when you heal one member of a family, you heal the family. And because I've had that said to me by a client, you know, thank you, because my family's well again now. The challenge I have is the going back into a system that's not regenerative, and the fallout of that is they could relapse, basically, because that system out there usually, and I can see it now, you know, with the COVID, people are getting back into that hype about Christmas and all the rest of it, and I think, are you not learning anything? Have you not learned anything from the last 2 years, basically?
Yeah.
Or what's important in life?
It is tricky when, I'm going to come to Sally now, but it is tricky when, you know, I think we have to, as this is my perspective, we just have to do what we can, where we can, knowing that the rest of the system isn't, we're not perfect and the rest of the system's not perfect yet. I'll put it up in the groups, and I might be able to get it onto our social media as well, but there was a quote by a guy who won a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and his basic point was, you create small islands of coherence, and ultimately those small islands of coherence resonate together to tip the state of the entire system. So it's basically this ground up, bottom up system shift. And after COP26, I just thought, well, that's the only thing left for us now. That's what we have to do. Just do what we can, where we can, how we can. thank you, Jeanette, for that. And I love that you brought the political into it, because I think, yeah, as psychologists, in a sense, we have, you know, a political role on that. Sally, you're muted, but I loved your point. You argued the majority of psychology is extractive because of how research is conducted. So tell us more about that. What's your perspective there?
Yeah, I mean, just following on, I am also very, I think psychologists need to be much more political. And for those who don't know, psychologists for social change are sort of a network acting on the social wider determinants of health and well-being. And I would argue, I mean, I agree with everything that was just said, especially about the pharmaceutical industry and the power there. And it's extractive. Psychology can be extractive with the research point, which I'll get to, but secondly, because it's so individualistic and because it neglects the wider context, especially issues around poverty and the destruction of our natural resources, which is obviously what we're talking about, which is, so the individualistic nature of current psychological practice, I think, is extractive and exploitative. And in regards to research, research is done to people and on people and not with people and by people. And it's not done in partnership with them in questions that they're perhaps facing in their community, for example, or interested in. And there's very little, and who gets to decide what is evidence and what constitutes evidence is also a deeply political issue. So I'll finish my rant there.
I love that. We'll keep ranting. Yes, one of the things I had written down which I'm only just getting my head around really, is actually one of the big extractive things that we do as psychologists. Hi, Rebecca, joining us from the USA. Is the gathering and hoarding of knowledge and the appropriation of knowledge, power and resources, which I think speaks to what you were just saying there, Sally. And I love this point of, are we doing research with people and by people? Who's coming up with the research questions? The flipping ivory tower people, or, the ones who are actually living with it? Exactly. Fantastic. Thanks for that. Okay, let's move into the next thing. Oh, sorry, Alice, I know you have your hand up. Are we okay to just move into the next question, or is it a quick one?
It's another question.
Okay, awesome.
What you were saying, Sally, really spoke to me, and and it's something that, I mean, even as a teenager, it was hugely important to me, and and human rights and all of these sort of things is actually what fueled me to become a psychologist in the first place. And but I guess as time has gone on, I've struggled with kind of how to protect myself when the external world is, there's so much change needed. And so my question is not that I expect an answer, but, how do we balance that? Because I burnt out because I felt like I was constantly going against a current and never getting anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm just jumping in here, Alice, is because this next question is, what are the questions, thoughts, beliefs and emotions that we're left with at this point, or that are present for us now? So just, I mean, that was a really good example of perhaps one of them that is still present for you. Can I maybe offer you a minute or so just to reflect on that? What questions, thoughts, beliefs, emotions are still present for you around this topic of creating regenerative psychology practices? It's like any other business. Okay, I'm going to open the mics again in case anyone wants to jump in with their comment. Rebecca, you're there. You had your finger on the mute button to unmute it.
Ready to talk. I've been listening the whole time. Well, most of the time, but I've got the baby in the car. And anyway, so I've been thinking, as you've all been talking, about, I mean, obviously this is going to come from me because I am who I am as a writer, but I feel that there is a restorative, regenerative piece to psychology by moving away from, which you've introduced me to, Wendy, this model of entrepreneur to infopreneur, and being someone who shares the broader knowledge, but from a practitioner perspective. So it's not coming necessarily from academia, which is where I think a lot of the knowledge comes from, and it makes it inaccessible to many of us, even though there's, you know, talk of more open source information, but I'm not really seeing that happening. So I think by sharing some of our knowledge and our insights and learnings through writing, we can really touch more people than just on this one-to-one basis. But what's important about that, because I know people have been writing forever and there's trillions of books out there, and you know, they're not necessarily pinpointing specific things because they're written for a broad audience. What I think is important, and that I'm seeing in so many areas now, and I've actually just written another article about it, is this concept of autonomy and agency. And the more that we can share what we know, but in a way that gives people the tools and the opportunity to learn themselves and to apply those ideas in their own settings with our continued support, gives that opportunity for that broader touch, that broader reach with people. And I mean, that's, you know, what my book's about, but I've also read a lot more about this in the workplace setting. I'm currently reading a book which I think is brilliant. I think you might all enjoy it, which is called, well, actually I've just finished reading it. What's it called? I Think You Should Talk to Someone. And it's a written by a therapist who finds her own therapist because she's realizing she's going through problems, but it talks about all of the different therapy sessions that she's held with people and the fundamental shifts that they've gone through, which is just a way of teaching people about that. I've got to go on mute. 1 sec.
No worries. Who else wants to go next? Fiona. I tell you what, that's much easier than faffing about with the Zoom button.
Sorry, just it had temporarily disappeared.
No, don't worry.
I mean, the things that are outstanding for me were, I mean, obvious things, but it was, how can I engage in activities that are more regenerative, and what action can I take now? So I have a concrete action now to take. I'm really clear on it. So those for me are the two things. I'm more aware of it, and what am I going to do now? And I have one concrete thing I'm taking action on as a result, because I've been wavering, and this has really helped me see this is what I need to do and want to do.
Is it possible to share that? I don't want to pry, but
yeah. I'm happy to share. So I'm in a couple of LinkedIn pods where we put our LinkedIn posts or whatever, our Instagram posts up, and we share and support them. And that's fine. There's one particular group, I'm in loads, I'm in 3, you know, this one is particularly active, but just some of the participants in the group, I find myself not really wanting to support what they're saying because I disagree with them. It's not appropriate for me to go on and say, I disagree with what you're doing there. So I think the best option for me is to exit and not do that. And so that's part of it, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. It's no longer a right fit for me. The members of the group have changed, and now it's not the right fit for me because I don't want to be seen to support people who I don't agree with. There's nothing wrong. I'm not going to report them to the police. It's just I don't agree with where they are ideologically. And so I don't want to be there.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. Who's next? I can't see everyone. Carlis, are you are unmuted? but I don't know if that's on purpose. Maybe not. Okay. Anyone else? Alice, did you have your hand up then? Sorry, did I miss it? No? I've got a couple. One is we've not come to the big elephant in the room, which is our lack of inclusion and diversity in psychology. And I struggle with this so much. I love creating these events and coming together with all of you. And I really want us to open it up more and more. And I don't know how to get more and different people involved. And I really feel like in psychology, that humanity as a whole is missing so much because we have such a constrained approach to what psychology is as a science or even as a practice. So I really struggle with that. One of the big things I've taken away from this actually is that we need to have this push towards democratizing psychology as a practice, literally giving it away. And that makes me laugh as somebody who kind of has a business that runs on supporting people in independent practice. We've got to give it away, guys. I'm not sure how popular that advice is going to be. But, and this is the key when it comes to all regenerative business models, what does it look like to be democratizing it, to be opening up access, and to still make an income that is enough, right? There's something in regenerative practices called the concept of enough, and it's the opposite of the hoarding that is the problem. And there's something in there about the interplay between the two things. When's it enough? I find myself in my practice, in our business, even though we want to help people more, feeling, I don't know if I'm doing myself a disservice here or, Fiona, I'm letting the cat out of the bag. Don't feel the need for this to become some kind of 7-8 figure self-aggrandizement project. There's value to be created together, and we need regenerative models of practice that can sustain people, that give people enough resources and that create value. And I think there's a world of need out there, and nobody's going to kind of lose out. Rebecca, I can't see. Oh yes, you have. Ava's good at letting me know when I've not spotted that there's a hand raised. Hi there.
Hi. So I just was thinking about this piece about diversity, and while I am still kind of focused on my practice a little bit, I've also got a full-time job, and I work a company called Mind Gym, and the work that they're doing. So Mind Gym is a psychology company. They apply psychological practices in the workplace. Behavioral science practices, and they are what the biggest thing that they sell now is DE&I programs, diversity, equity and inclusion programs. I think they're like now a front runner in this area. So not only are they selling this stuff into businesses and creating programs that are encouraging this to happen in massive organizations. I mean, they work with, about, I think it's something like 60% of FTSE 100 companies. And I can't remember what the other financial things called, but anyway, massive companies. So they're doing that, but they're also really big on hiring diverse people from diverse backgrounds. So I feel like I'm really in a position where I'm less worried about that, because I feel like I'm like at the tip of it, like at the forefront of it. I can see it happening. And I can see, I just did an interview the other day with a woman who is a transsexual. And it was brilliant. It was amazing to see that that passion and drive and lack of fear and worry that she was going to be rejected because of her status as someone who'd gone through gender reassignment. And she just, and I thought, this is a sign of the changing times that we're in, that this is acceptable now. And I felt really just happy to be in that place, that I was part of that, so sorry, that's I'm kind of going off track a little bit, but if it feels like it's not happening in some areas, what I'm saying is it's happening where I see it. There is diversity, equity, and inclusion going on.
It feels hopeful, at least in some areas.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Rebecca. So just coming to the last kind of 5 minutes, I just wanted to point out that Michelle put into the chat box a link to a journal article, which is about a manifesto for the future of work and organizational psychology. But what we'll do is post a link to that when we put the video on YouTube. And what I think I might do as well is pull some of the comments out of and some snippets out of this video as well, and kind of share them. One of the things I'd like to do, it's a shame, I'll try and track Sally down as well and see if she's got social media handles, or if she's anywhere where we can connect with her on social media, and maybe encourage her to come back to the conversation and post any of those details herself. 4 things that are, so in terms of future things to do in this series, what we were thinking of doing next month, or every other month. So every other month having an open forum with some questions like this. Also, and I think this point of democratizing psychology and opening those questions up, I'm going to be working my socks off to kind of try and open this space up to get people from different backgrounds to also contribute questions for us. And then the other thing that I wanted to do every other month is a kind of regenerative practices book club. There's a lot of stuff being written. I've got to be mindful about the curation of which books we focus on, because I don't want it to be just, books from one particular part of the world. This is a book that I've been reading, and it's by this chap, Daniel Christian Wall. So we're going to put a date in January 2022. Now, if you don't want to pick up this book, it's quite dense, to be quite honest. If you don't want to pick up that book, though, Daniel Christian Wall also writes on medium.com. And so what we'll do is post a link through to his Medium account. He's one of these people also following this idea of an open knowledge network, where he shares a lot of his stuff anyway. And so we'll do that, and, go and have a look at some of his work also on Medium, and we can get together and perhaps think about how some of these principles and practices could be adapted into our psychology practices. That's my little piece. In February 2022, we'll have a discussion similar to today. If there was one thing that you're going to do as a consequence of your participation today, maybe could you drop that in the chat, maybe just a short phrase or word or sentence to share what might be one of your action steps from today. I'm going to have a go at doing that as well, but I'm going to mute myself so stop making noises on the video. So Fiona, you're joining us for the book club as well. I love that. So Fiona's leaving the social media group that doesn't align with her values. Oh my goodness. I think if all of us did that, the stock of Facebook and Twitter would fall. I'm going to, Rebecca's in for the book group. I'm working harder to democratise psychology. I've got a Twitter account and the handle is at Regenerative Psy. So if any of you want to connect with me on Twitter, that's where I'm trying to reach out and connect more. Consider more the psychological and political interplay. Thanks, Jeanette, that's brilliant. Rebecca says she's curious about what research with and by people looks like in practice. Yeah. I'd look that is a whole, that might be our February thing actually. Eva, make a note of that one. Michelle is thinking more about managing energy, and she also loves a book club. Well, Michelle's got a wonderful book club, so we'll make sure that everyone is connecting with everyone who's been on here as well. Any other points? Let's have a look. Alice is going to find 1 or 2 networking communities that align with her values, focusing on collaboration and communication rather than more energy depleting activities such as social media. Yeah, energy depletion versus energy restoration is a really good indicator, right, of when we're heading in the right direction. Jade has said she's going to keep exploring different ways to work towards developing practice ideas that move individualized therapy and look politically about our health. Oh, sorry, holistically about us. Jade, you described that bit. I'm getting it wrong.
I meant to put holistically. I think it's more just thinking about our physical and psychological health as being one, and so I have the dream, as you know, of having a holistic practice, connecting people with nature on a farm, just looking beyond just I guess the one-to-one therapy, and being able to bring together
exactly
various practices that actually do work holistically together.
Exactly. Well, the earlier points that were made about how much energy are we using in one-to-one therapy rooms where we could be, walking together outside, not using energy in a resource intensive, just this whole thing of how do we do this that isn't using energy, but it's actually restoring the environment. Brilliant. Thank you everyone for today. If you've got any feedback on what would help us as well in terms of making these events work better for you, please let us know. We're going with, what we can think of. We're trying it out. So we really would be open to your feedback on that as well. Keep an eye out for the social media stuff. We'll tag you in it, and then please do share your social media handles. I know some of you have said, sod it, we're getting off social media now, so you might not be doing that, but however we can connect with you and your practices, that would be awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, and see you in January for the book club. Thanks, Rebecca. Yep, see you soon, everyone.
Thanks so much, Wendy.
Pleasure.